are handed to us by God and my book, then I feel like you cannot participate in any meaningful debate because you're already excluding us and others because you've kind of claimed certain knowledge that nobody else can question. So the question of whether they can coexist has to be specified where and when. Science religion is not a scientific endeavor. It doesn't work like science. It doesn't discover things or doesn't create things. Also, for me, there are questions about values and meaning. Yes, we are a value seeking and meaning species. And if that's what religions want to say and claim that they still have this domain that they can impact, okay, fine, that's an open question about our values and morality and ethics, and we should be open to all debate. As I said, I encourage pluralism myself, and I don't think one should exclude anyone or any sect or any group from any discussion. But yet science also is making advances in actually showing us that what we consider to be morals and ethics and ways of, like people think that could only be handed by God, for instance. Well, we know that now there's a lot of evolutionary pressures and even brain structures that actually moderate our morality and ethics, regardless of being educated in any type of religion. For instance, we know even from different species like monkeys and even other primates that they have some kind of a primitive morality and ethics where they respond toward injustices and unfairness. So I think to delegate religion to, okay, we can't talk about science, but we can talk about values and meaning, I think also is challenged for me by that science is also opening roads to us to see that even our most cherished values and moralities are actually structures that have evolved over thousands of years through interaction with environments and pressures and through our own personal experience.
Thank you. Dr. Abbas, actually I'll come back to you, but I would like to go to Imam Ahmad just because he hasn't had yet the time to speak, so please.
Yeah, I think my answer to whether science and Islam can coexist, I would say it depends. And I would often say that no, it cannot coexist if science is not rooted in compassion and conscience, integrity and humility. There's really a case to be made for intellectual humility. No matter where I am at my journey of education, am I humble enough to say I could change maybe within a few years if other evidence or something else comes to light. But science should be there for the greater good. I think of what Trump often says, let's make America great again. Is it only for Caucasian Americans, for all Americans? Should we make this world great again for all humanity and for all creation for that matter, including the environment? But truth is a problematic concept, because if I look at the glass prism, if light gets refracted through the glass prism, it has so many, the Roy-Bergov type of spectrum of colors. Where do you stand on the spectrum? Do you see the truth through a red lens or an indigo lens or whatever the case may be? And oftentimes science really helps me in my faith. If I study water molecule and I see, well, hydrogen and oxygen independently are inflammable, highly inflammable, and somehow they could come with a proper valency and could come together and actually create water. Wow, this is really now increasing my faith. And I've really been intrigued the first time I went to Mecca, and you have this National Geographic documentaries coming up, and tens of people immediately want to see how and looking at God's creation. So science in many ways have actually increased my faith in the miracles that are out there, just the way the human body functions and the way the world functions. But to us, if we look at the Galileo and the other argument, the theomorphic and the anthropomorphic argument, To us, the religion is the greater and science is the smaller, and religion can encompass science and not the other way around. And just one last point I have to make, I think it's also about definitions, because I think what we didn't discuss is maybe what Sharia is. But Sharia, my definition is, Sharia is multiple salient ways of being human. Now, if that is my definition of Sharia, or my definition of what Islam should be, then I think it just does change. Very often we make certain statements that nothing is absolutely certain. Even that statement itself is not certain. So I think philosophically that is problematic. But the bigger question would also come is, let us say I derive at a certain definition of science, and that seems to be my superior definition. If I'm given the power of the most powerful man on earth, how am I going to treat those people who do not meet my definition of science? Am I going to see them as primitive or barbaric and maybe try to eliminate them or have some genocide? Those are some of the other questions we need to think of.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Please go ahead.
Thank you. After hearing the professionals here on these panels, I would say, is it my goal to prove the religious claims? I would say no. The burden is on the ones who believe in them or in these claims. It's not on me. On the other hand, all I want is that the claims to be translated and carried out. All what I don't want is I would be afraid that if these claims would be carried in a way to prevent me from living my way with freedom to think and live with my convictions. If these claims would prevent me from being free, from working about my freedom and my happiness, yes, I would fight against them. But other than that, the burden is not on me to claim that there is a God or there is no God. I think it's up to each individual to determine that and try to live with it. Whether I believe or not is none of anyone else's business. It's my business. However, if the belief in God is going to prevent me or is going to create some certain society norms that yes is going to interfere in my my happiness, in my life, that is where I draw a line, and then I would fight against that regardless what the claim is. So I would vote, really, because we must have acceptance in society, and I would say that being here and being in this society, I really believe that if we were in an Arab country, probably we wouldn't be, or in a Muslim country, probably we wouldn't be even allowed to even discuss this subject. And that is where I draw the line. We must discuss this subject. And we must be able to say and stay and give the freedom to all people to speak whatever they want, whatever they feel like. That's what I say. On the other hand, I would say that to the Imam that yes, science. I don't think that science, the objective of science is really would be made with compassion, because the same science that created the nuclear bomb created a treatment for cancer to help at least cancer patients. The same basic advancement in science created a treatment to help cancer patients in surviving a lot longer. Okay, so with respect to compassion, it's up to us to utilize the results of science to advance our happiness, to advance our living conditions and our humanity. It is not up to science, and that's why I say yes, they do exist, and this is where if we can combine, and if we can get to the point where religious people would accept the fact that yes, you can be religious or you can be non-religious, and let's live in a society where we don't impose on each other's, then that would be the ultimate coexistence. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. We're actually going to direct now the attention to the audience. Hi. So does anybody have any question that they would like to ask? Anybody? No? Right. I'm actually gonna ask a question myself, and it's very specific to Adnan. So you've mentioned in your presentation about basically that science kind of help societies or people adapt. Can we say the same thing about religion in case of tragedy, other situations?
Yes, I think you're right about the religion, because there is a place for it in terms of, it's helping in these ceremonial and ritualistic aspects of it that can provide comfort to people. And again, for me, the most important thing is, does it work? Does something work? And that's the instrumentality of it. It's not about absolute truth, as Suhail was saying. There's no absolutes in science. So for me, yes. But what I meant mainly when I said that is that science makes us adapt, is that intelligence mainly is a product of evolution, is a product of our interaction as a species with our environments. Intelligence is not something specific to humans. Intelligence is something that is, all species show part of it as they interact with their environment. Even small cells, or as bacteria, they showed ways of interacting with their environment by the way they actually open up and absorb nutrients and release other things to their environment, exchange things with it. So intelligence is not something abstract. We, as all other species that have ever existed, we had to face certain pressures from the environment, and we had to react to it. And intelligence helped us, and continues to help us to adapt to our environment. And that's the most important thing for me, is that it's evolutionary epistemology, that the meaning of science is not related to absolute truth out there to find it and mimic it. It's actually related to how we engage with our environment and adapt to it. Would you say that we are more intelligent than, for instance, a bat? I mean, that's a good question. What does it mean to be intelligent more than a bat? Well, for their own environment, they have adapted, and they can actually navigate their environment. I can't live the way a bat lives because I cannot emit those sonar signals and reflect back. Does this mean that I'm smarter than them because I have language? No, it means I'm more adapted to my environment. And that's the definition of intelligence and science, I'm saying. Science is a product of intelligence. Intelligence itself is a product of our minds and brains that are also products of biology. And that's what it is for me. And that's what I mean, it helps us adapt. But before I finish, I would like to agree with Dr. Abbas on what he said. It's not a question of coexistence, as also a question of, will your values impinge on my values? Will your beliefs let me not live the way of my conscience and my convictions? John Stuart Mill, very famous philosopher about liberty. On liberty, he said that, liberty doesn't mean that majority rules. Liberty means that even people who are the minority will have a voice, will have a way to say and speak up. That's the value of science that I'm advocating of, the values of John Stuart Mill, of pluralism, and that the majority would never, ever actually oppress any minority, even if the majority came to any place by elections or by democracy, because it's called the dictatorship of the majority. We cannot allow majority to oppress minorities, whoever these minorities. So science that advocates, or religion that advocates for the rights of everyone, I'm welcome to it, as Dr. Abbas was saying, and we can coexist in that regards. Values are values. We can debate these things until we, whatever, disagree or not.
I think that though, the issue is that religion is open to interpretation. So how do we, I guess, maybe how does science come in place here to challenge some notions that people have about that the religion is superior to somebody else's, and in that sense they kind of, try to exclude others or suppress them. If that makes any sense.
I think Suhail, in his presentation, talked about how science spoke about these stories even from the Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran, that speaks about all these miracles. And science has been able to say with a certain conviction that there are certain things that are beyond our physical universe and beyond our laws that we have around us. That's one thing. Science also have been talking about morality and ethics and our intuitive conscious that is not related to any, teaching and education. We are actually born and we inherit from our species a lot of things that we help us not even live, but actually live an ethical life. So science also is contributing to these questions, and religion cannot just continue to claim that this is also only, like this is only my territory, don't come, values and ethics are my territory. You can talk about buildings and atoms, but you cannot talk about ethics. That's not actually what we're seeing lately, because as I said, the belief that we are part of our biology, that means also our morality and ethics is a product of biology.
All right. Does anybody would like to add anything? Please.
So when Wissam asked me to be on the panel, I figured, okay, you know what, I got to do some research to answer this question. And then I realized that the research would have been life, right? There's no Wikipedia or new scripture or, we've been through it, right? And at the end of the day, we had to make a personal decision. So I boiled it down, similar to my answer, to data and science is not going to come in handy. I think one of the major things that we miss when we say Islam or religion is the belief in the second life, heaven and hell. And there's no data that would ever come back, nobody's ever come back and say, yo, you know what, there is heaven, there is hell. But on the other extreme, right, just like I said earlier, when it comes to proof of lack of existence of God, right, simple scientific methodology, you can't say, I looked everywhere and I did not find God. When I look at Sohail's definition of science, knowledge about the structure and behavior of the natural and physical world based on facts that you can prove, for example, by experiments. There's this experiment that was what's called sensory deprivation. If you were to, grab a human and put him in a quiet chamber, I think you couldn't last more than an hour, or like the record is like an hour before you start going insane. And that room is basically dark and absolutely quiet, like 0 decibels. You come to a point where you can hear your own blood moving in your veins, and you have to fill the void because we have to use our senses, our 5 senses, to make sense of what's around us. So even when we're not using science, we are actually using science. I could see, Sohail's, when he brought up, I'm trying to remember the word. Basically, scientific rules are very straightforward, right? Math always has an answer that is 1 + 1 will be 2. But then when we go into confirmation bias, right? Science could prove many things in the Quran or in the Bible that are disprove many things, but from confirmation bias, religious people might always latch on the one true or one item that can actually gets proved by science. Not to say that today we have billions of AV audio video recording devices, and we don't see any supernatural events popping up or being documented. Now, does that disprove that supernatural did not happen? No. Does it prove it? I still say no, right? You can't say the data doesn't exist. We can still see the data. That's what the definition of Dr. Jabir, even a theory, today's theory, could become a hypothesis or get disproved because data always tends to come in. The other thing is supernatural, right? I could say personally, I've had dreams in my sleep that came true a year later, like scene for scene. I would say, hell, this is a deja vu. Like I've lived this before, right? So from Sohail's perspective, and back to to science and Islam, can they coexist? When we change the approach of the definition of science, right? Science is to satisfy a human need to fill the void in our brain, based on the sensory deprivation experiment that I brought up, and also based on, I believe it was Plato who, in Plato where, grabbed, 3 people, chained them in a cave, and, all they saw was the light and just, the shadow of the people giving them food, right? And they filled in the void. That became their reality, to Dr. Jaber's point of intelligence, right? Or the analogy of the bat. And I see the same thing. So we, at the end of the day, it comes down, as I said, happiness, serotonin and dopamine in our brain. Everything in our brain is a chemical reaction. And I see Wissam probably, but it comes to a chemical reaction, serotonin and dopamine, and we need science just as we need religion to satisfy our inner soul. Thank you.
I wanted to respond to some of the points brought up. So earlier, even though we weren't talking specifically about definitions of things like atheism, there was the statement that you made that we can't prove that atheism or atheists have not been able to prove that there is no God and so forth. And I think what's happening there is you're using the Gnostic definition of atheism.